How can you make sure that your people and your systems are safe on Sunday? Let's talk about it today.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey friends, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here this week. If you like our show, if you would take a moment and subscribe, like, and share wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode of the show. Well, today I have two great people on the podcast. First up is Simon Osamoh. I am fond of calling him the Jack Bauer of church security. Simon is a leading security specialist focused on risk management for houses of worship and is the founder of both Kingswood Security Consulting and the Worship Security Academy. He's an expert when it comes to securing church operations for safety teams. If you are going to make Sunday happen, you need to be prepared for any scenario. Simon walks through some ways to de-escalate situations and be prepared for any circumstance that might happen in the way of safety at your church. I also welcome Roger Blalock. Roger is an electronics engineer at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, N-I-S-T. He has nearly 20 years of experience in telecommunications, and Roger and I talked about ways to keep your computer systems locked down and secure for Sunday. We joked with Roger at CFX, where we were at when we recorded this interview, that this content on the surface does not sound very appealing, does not sound very exciting or sexy, but it actually turned out to be very, very informative and one of our favorite interviews at CFX. So I'm hoping that you feel the same about Roger. He's got some great ways for you to lock down your computer, keep your personal computer safe, and also keep all your computers on Sunday, from your presentation software computers to all of your network safe on Sunday. That includes your kids' check-in computers and all of that. So in order to make Sunday happen in the worship experience and beyond, Roger's going to share with us some great ways to keep your security networks, your computer systems safe. So you're in for some great content today. I have Simon, up first. He's coming up right after this. Hey guys, I'm hanging out with our lead designer, Angie Lomas. Angie, talk to me about ready-made worship media. What are a couple of your favorites and how churches are using those?
Well, we do such a wide variety of different projects for ready-made. One of the projects that I did this summer, getting ready for fall, is the time change. And so it was, you get an extra hour of sleep. And so it's just an announcement graphic, which is just a really fun one to do. Some of the things that I really like doing are the boxes that we create. So you get the main title slide, but then you also get, a lot of different assets that you can use during your service. So we did one called The Body, and it's all about the body of the church and how we're all, different body parts. And so the graphic was really cool because it kind of had this illustration of different anatomy. And so that was a really fun one. And then of course we have, social graphics, and we're getting ready for Christmas and Easter and all of the main holidays. But then you have just the time change, or just in general, come live stream with us or come join our church. So we have such a wide variety that it's been fun to knock out different designs for such a array of things.
Do you feel that? I mean, obviously never a dull moment. That you're getting to touch all kinds of different things.
Yeah, it's not just like the big Easter and Christmas, which we love doing, but it's the little one-off of hey, come to our fall bash, or hey, check out our kids ministry. And so yeah, it's kind of being able to add into your library of assets, I guess, for a church ministry that it's not just, well, we only have time to do Easter, Christmas, but why don't we just go on and snag a couple of these that we can use throughout the year? I love being able to come alongside a different, church staffs and being able to provide those kinds of assets.
Yeah, and our library is really crafted in that way, both at 1230 Media and then our 1230 Kids library. They're both crafted in such a way that it's a quick grab and go. Or you can build out your whole series with our series in a box or other products. So really to save the church time and the team time. We both know how overloaded the staff member can be at a church. And so to go on and grab some social graphics or some title graphics, announcements, or even a series, things like that saves you a lot of time so that you can spend more time with your volunteers, with your family, and have a life and not burn out so quickly. So, Angie, thank you for all that you do for our ready-made library and just serving the church in general. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Hey guys, I'm Carl Barnhill. I'm here with Simon Osamoh. Simon, give me a little bit of your title and the security company that you work for.
So Kingswood Security Consulting was born in 2014, and I've got a background as a British law enforcement officer. When I first emigrated here to the US, I was head of counterterrorism at Mall of America, Minnesota. And I really had a calling to help churches stay safe and secure. So primarily we focus on non-profit safety and security risk management.
So I think what you're saying is you're the Jack Bauer of the church world. Would I be accurate in that?
Yeah, maybe that. Maybe the Luther, maybe the Idris Elba of the church world. Yes, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. So tell me what all you did there. So you led the counter-terrorist
correct, yes. I mean, Mall of America is 6 million square feet, 42 million visitors per year. I led counterterrorism, which means I sort of was in regular communication with a lot of the federal intelligence services and oversaw a team of highly trained practitioners that go looking for behavior indicators closely associated with terroristic activities. So all my life I've had positions that have had a great depth of responsibility. So it was it was second nature, really.
What is the craziest thing that you've seen that you can actually tell us about?
Good question. I wasn't prepared for that. I think one of the scariest things that I've ever come across is that I was 21 years old in the British Police and was first on scene to an attempted murder where I actually turned into a murder where a woman died in my arms, and it really told me at such a young age, I think I was 21 at the time when it happened, and it really reinforced what a depth of responsibility there is in law enforcement and in safety and security. And I think that's really one of the reasons what drives me now is to always try to do whatever I can to help anyone stay safe and secure. I believe everyone has the right to be safe and secure in today's world.
Good. We'll have a lot of respect. We all have a lot of respect for what you do in law enforcement. In general, how did that move to the church world? How did you get involved in ministry and keeping churches safe?
And that's a great question. And, I was actually presenting at a conference in Disney. And, I was head of counterterrorism at Mall of America. And a police department called me and said, we've got this church. We know your background. We feel that you could help them in safety and security and, lifelong Christian. I said, well, I can do. I'm the security guy, but I know nothing about church security. And I went there one Wednesday evening. I came away really knowing a couple of things, that there was a real need for biblically based risk management, and that the Lord put it on my heart to help his churches. And since then, I've authored 3 books and helped churches across the US. So it was, it really was a blessing by God to sort of put me in a position that I'm in, really.
Well, I think in today's culture, there's definitely a need for it. We've seen, an increase in church shootings and, different things. So making sure that we're secure, making sure that we're prepared is definitely a need. So let's talk through, what does an emergency preparedness look like? What do I need to even prepare for?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So, most organizations outside of non-profits and for-profits world, most often they will have what they call an emergency operations plan, and it's something that we need here within churches. And really, what you're looking to do is to identify all the things that can go wrong within your organization. It could be natural disasters, human disasters, technology. Try to understand and identify that universe of all the things that can go wrong. then you're going to create some simple steps, some procedures, could be policy, as to what happens when we're in those situations. What do we want our staff and volunteers to do? So we have a pre-planned response, so we're prepared for those emergencies. We're not saying that these things are going to happen every day, but if they do, staff and volunteers are trained and know how they need to respond.
Does it matter my church size? If I'm a church of 50 people or 50,000 people, I should still be prepared.
Absolutely. I think it's John 16:33 that says, "For in this world you will have trouble." Scripture is telling us that there will be trouble in this world, and it doesn't matter the size of your congregation. I think we've recently come out of the hurricane in Florida, mass shootings. There's so much that's telling us that no matter where you are in life, you could be in a coffee shop, everyone needs to be prepared and have a type of plan to say, if something that I can't even imagine bad happens, what is my response going to be to do? So I actually am more concerned with those smaller churches than I am the larger churches.
How so? Why?
Just because generally they're less prepared, because they have the attitude, because we're small, nothing is ever going to happen. There's a little bit more denial of danger. So yeah, it's important.
Wow, very interesting. So let's talk through those steps of emergency preparedness. So walk me through those steps, being prepared.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'd say, and there's sort of three things that I would talk about in emergency preparedness. I think first is identifying what your risk universe is. So it's really looking at human disasters, natural disasters, technology, writing down, really getting that list, everything that can go wrong. Let's write it all down so we understand what our universe is, what are we up against. And then once we then have that list, the second step I then move into is, well, how are we going to respond? And that's something that a lot of organizations don't think too deeply in, but it's something that when you're in the moment, to have that pre-planned response is really important. And it's covering things like crisis communications, education of people about, hey, this is our response, making sure that you're socializing your plans with other ministry leaders and also people in your congregation so they understand, okay, yeah, this is what you want me to do if there's a lost child, if there's a child abduction, if there's severe weather. So those are the sort of first two things I ask people to do, is identify your universe, and second is then work out what's your plan going to be, your response in relation to those.
So I've been in situations with a couple of different churches that the security of children, you'd find children just out. Or let me ask you this question: the ticketing system for kids check-in. I'm rabbit trailing. I'll come back to your notes. But the kids check-in, we use this ticketing system where the child gets a sticker on their person, and then the parent has the other half of that. Well, sometimes I'll walk back to pick up my child, and there's let me just get the sticker. There's no connection between, let me make sure that the numbers match up with things like that. So I guess my question is, how concerned do I need to be about security? Do I need to be flippant about it? Obviously not, but how serious do we need to be about child security and things that might happen in my church?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. I think you need to be conscious of security and you need to be aware. You don't need to be fearful, but one thing that we do need to have is make sure that anyone understands that this is serious. Things can go wrong. And I often say that familiarity breeds content. And what I mean by that is that because the more we do things, the more we recognize Simon. When Simon said, "But I've lost my badge and can I get my son?" we'll let our guard down to our protocols that we put in place to make sure people are safe. And that's really what you were describing there, is that the attitude becomes, well, the door starts getting propped open. Then that becomes a regular behavior. Someone's not checking that the badge is the same as a parent. That becomes a culture then that we don't check the labels. So having a strong security culture is the foundation really of all emergency preparedness, because if people aren't going to follow your procedures as to what you're going to write down, when your house is then built on sand, then it's not going to stand.
So even if I know, let's use the child example again, even if I know that person, one thing I'm thinking of is, well, other parents that are standing around might not know how well I know this person, things like that, and they're just seeing, you lost your tag or whatever.
Yeah.
So how strict do we need to be in our churches about not only child security, but our protocols, our preparedness? How strict do we need to be on ourselves?
Yeah, great question. And we need to follow the process that is written down. If it is your executive pastor collecting his grandchild, if it's your lead pastor, if it's some member of staff, it doesn't matter who it is. What we need to do is follow the process. And what I often say to facilities leaders and operations leaders who most often oversee safety and security at churches is that if you create the standard, it then doesn't matter who it is. You're just saying, well, the standard tells me I need to check your badge, so I know you're the executive pastor, but I've got to ask you as well, as opposed to sort of creating bypass of those rules for key individuals. It's easy to say, doesn't matter who stood in front of me, the protocol is still the same, and actually more than empowers the person to feel like their role matters, and rather than it being inconsistent in what they've been asked to do.
Very good point. So let's talk between staff and volunteers and maybe hired security. Like, how much of that needs to be on which role?
Yeah, and so most churches will have some type of safety team, and I think it's okay to have volunteers in that role. I think what a church needs to really understand is there is a strong element of training that needs to go on there. Those people on the safety team need to understand the church culture. I really believe that they should be members of the church to show their commitment. And here's the reason why, that your reputation rests on these people that are going to put themselves into a dangerous position. Your reputation rests on these people that are going to interact with people that could be displaying behaviours that are different in your church. So you want to make sure that they have strong judgment, they're members, they make sound decisions, and understand the culture of your church. When they're welcoming and greeting people, they're going to do things the right way, because anything adverse that they do is then going to come back onto a church. So absolutely, yes, use volunteers, but it's very different than children's ministry or the worship team. These people need to be very well trained and educated on what their role is, so they don't overstep those boundaries, because there's a lot more liability and risk if they do.
Should I have all quote unquote undercover folks, or should I have visible uniformed cops at my location?
And that's quite a common question, and I think it's most probably an and or. I believe it's good to have some sort of clandestine people that don't, but no one knows who they are. They might sit in key positions. And I think it's also useful for your congregation to see that you are keeping them safe and secure, and I know where to go if I have trouble. I do believe, from working with hundreds of churches across the country, most people in today's world really know that it's dangerous and that they want to feel safe. And I think COVID really showed us that if people don't feel safe, they didn't come to our churches. So making them feel safe is a key to having a healthy congregation. And I believe part of that is having overt security team members, a medical team where they know who to go to in that emergency. I think attitudes have most probably changed the last 2 years, that they expect a church to have security that perhaps they don't ordinarily have.
Good. All right. Those folks who are here in the room, I'm going to ask Simon a couple more questions, but if you guys have anything, kind of be thinking, and we can talk through a couple of things if you have that. So last couple questions for you is, talk to me about drilling or drill exercises. How often, how should I run through exercises if the worst happens?
Yeah, great question. And when you have an emergency operation plan, so you know what your risk universe is, you know how you want people to respond. The only way to know, is this going to work in a highly stressful situation, is to practice. And a lot of organizations, they will do drills, but they will say, well, at school, we did all our drills in the first semester of school. Right. Well, that's not building the muscle memory which is needed to know that when you're in that situation, how are you going to respond? So drills, very honestly, are the only way to test, does your plan work, and to build the muscle memory that if someone's in that position, straight away, they know how to respond. So there's not a hard and fast rule on drills, but at least once a quarter, if not more.
So, okay, once every 4 months or so.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, excellent. Do you guys have any concerns, questions about security at your church? Anything that you're thinking through? Okay, should my security be armed?
And the armed question is very topical for churches across the country. And I mean, it's one of those, it is an and or, depending on your church community. But here's what I would say, is that in the last 10 years, deadly force incidents have risen dramatically in each different sector. And I think the risk of a active shooter, however small, is still present. It is still present. And knowing that the statistics are rising, what we have to ask ourselves in a church is, if that tragedy ever struck in our house of worship, when we have 50, 60, 200 people, 1,000 people worshiping, how are we going to defend ourselves against that risk? And so I think it really comes down to the culture and the appetite of a church to answer that question, whatever's best for them. But you really got to say, if someone walked in today intent to take human life, how are we going to stop that threat? And only the culture of a church knows we would respond with firearms, we would try and run, whatever that is. So I think they have to answer that question is, what do you want your response to be? Great.
So if people need to look into this, get more training from you, take next steps, how can we find you?
Yeah, so I have actually a 5-week group coaching program where I take church leaders through some of the things we've spoken about today. So my website is just kingswoodsc.com, and you can reach out to me there, and that's where a lot of my information is, so just kingswoodsc.com.
Excellent. If you guys want more training when it comes to your worship experience and how to do things to transform your worship experience from the parking lot to the parking lot, or your digital online experience, you can check us out at the Making Sunday Happen podcast. That's where this will be with Simon. So that's at makingsundayhappen.com, makingsundayhappen.com. Simon, thank you so much, man.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Hey guys, let me give you one quick way to connect with your volunteers outside of Sunday to help develop a dynamic volunteer culture at your church. I know this sounds super simple, but provide prayer needs for your team. Make a list of your volunteers by name and pray for them regularly. Be intentional about praying for them by name. If it's keep a spreadsheet or keep a document where you have prayer requests about each person, do it. Also be encouraging other team members to pray for each other as well. Let people know how your whole team can be praying for each other. You might send them messages like, hey team, pray for Miss Susan today. She's doing another round of chemo. Praying for you, Miss Susan, we're with you. Or you might send, hey team, pray for Matthew. He has a big science test today at Beechwood Middle School. You got this, Matthew. You can do it. You are the builder of the culture that you want to see in your team. Be intentional about how your team is praying for each other. Hey guys, Carl Barnhill here. I'm hanging out with Roger Blalock. Roger, tell me a little bit about you work for the government, right? So you've been spying on me for years.
Not quite. I work with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's part of the government Department of Commerce, and for the last 25 to 30 years, NIST has been making standards for people to be able to follow, to make computers and using computers, computer networks, make them all secure. They're used across this country, actually a lot of other countries, to take what we produce and use them for guidelines for their computers.
Okay, so we're going to talk about computer security, and I want to kind of bring this into Making Sunday Happen as close as we can. So maybe give us an overview here of your workshop, and then how does that apply to those who craft Sunday morning and the worship experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I think happens a lot of times when you mention cybersecurity, even you mention it to technical people, is sometimes you maybe start to get that little deer in the headlights look, right? Oh, cybersecurity, it's complicated. I don't know it. I don't understand it. I'm just not going to touch it. That's a really bad approach to take because all of our networks can be vulnerable. And when you're running a computer network at a church, particularly, there may be a lot of things that, your Wi-Fi network may allow somebody that you don't want in your network to be able to get in. So it's really important for the people that are not just the church operations team, but everybody that's part of a Sunday service to know what they need to be doing to safeguard their network and keep everything working right. Because that's, in the end of it, that's the end. We want everything to work right, no interruptions, no security breaches, but we want it to work.
So how vulnerable am I? How serious do I need to take computer security at my church?
So I think that part of that is a risk assessment that each church needs to do. And that's not a complicated thing. A lot of churches have a lot of what's called personally identifiable information. That's donor records, names, addresses, usually not your social security number, but how much money you gave last year, how much money you give every month, what you give it to. Those are very sensitive pieces of information. You don't want that leaked. You've got most churches now have got an audio network that's maybe running a Dante controller, or they're running video over their Ethernet, and you don't know what the software that is running on those. You don't know if that's trying to reach out to other computers on the network. So it's really important to work with your network guys and make sure those are isolated.
Okay, so let's bring this into the streaming world. How secure do I need to be when it comes to my live stream, especially for Sunday, things I'm doing for my church online?
Sure. I would say if you've worked with your network engineer in advance, now whether that's the guy at the church that's taking care of it, or if you've got an external service, you need to be having the conversations with him about how to secure that, how to separate it from all of that other information that you want to keep secure. So if there's some kind of a problem on the equipment you're using, it's not going to make the rest of your network vulnerable.
Okay, so let's talk through. You have 7 things in your talk that I want to kind of hit on. The first one is very easy to start with.
Yes.
And that's one thing I want to note for people is it's not as complicated, and I want you to speak to this. It's not as complicated as you might think to secure your network, correct?
Correct, yeah. Everybody understands the reason we lock a car, right? The reason you lock your house, the reason you lock the church when nobody's there. It's to keep the bad people out, but keep the honest people honest too, right? So one of the first things, everybody's got passwords. Most people, I tried to count mine the other days. I was over 100 before when I finally gave up. So everybody's got a lot of passwords. What do we all want to do? We want to take one password and use it in 30 locations.
Right.
That is not advisable, especially when you start mixing, your a password on an app with your bank account, with your church password. You need to be keeping a lot of those separate. So, and everybody knows how to do that. It's a little bit harder work, but doing that and also learning how to set a secure password where you're not just
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, not password 1, 2, 3. Right.
Right. So give me some pointers on password creation.
Absolutely. The truth, what people recommend over time has changed. A lot of people, when you log into one site may require 8 character minimum. Other one is 12 characters. Sometimes they say 16 characters, and you've got to have 3 special characters and whatever. So I'll tell you what I've done, what a lot of people are in the security field are recommending now is to not try to think of a 16 character password. Take the words to a song that you like, and use the first letter from every word in a phrase. Now, don't pick a super popular one. I wouldn't use Amazing Grace, right? Or I wouldn't use or take a scripture, but I wouldn't use John 3:16, right? Pick something that's more secure, where if somebody saw half of the password, they wouldn't be able to guess the other half.
Good. Okay, so what about management? Should I use a password management system like a Dashlane or something like that?
Well,
are those secure?
You almost have to, right? If you're going to have 100 passwords and they're all going to be different, there's not going to be a way that you can remember all of those unless you're more superhuman than I am. I'm not. I can't do that, right? So you've got to have a password manager. And there are so many options out there. Like I can't just toss out 1 or 2 and recommend that you use those. I will make one big distinction on them. Some of them are just software you install on your computer. Okay, those are lower risk than ones that you store in the cloud. There's several that store in the cloud, and you just have to be ready to understand, and you have to be watching out if that cloud provider was to have a security breach because somebody's trying 24 hours a day to breach theirs, right? So you can use that. Another really helpful tip is maybe you remember 8 characters of a password, you put the other 8 characters in the cloud storage. So if somebody were to compromise the cloud storage, they can't get your whole password.
Good. All right, so number 2 is a little bit more obscure, so I want you to explain it a little bit more, and that is increase cloud security with MFA.
Yeah,
so explain that.
I had to use MFA because the words multi-factor authentication wouldn't fit on the slide. So MFA is multi-factor authentication. It is where somebody asks, when you're logging in, you're asked for 2 pieces of information. Right. Everybody kind of gets this, right? It's a password, and then maybe they email you a PIN. Or maybe they email you a PIN the first time that you register a browser, right? And you have to do that every 30 days. Especially when you're using cloud security, like your Google account. If you've got a Google account, go turn on multi-factor authentication today. It's a very easy thing to do. Yes, it takes a little more time, but it I don't want to say infinitely increases it, but it greatly increases your security.
What do you think about browsers that that's not well, it can be multi-functional, but the like Google is going to save my password, or
right.
Chrome is going to save all my passwords.
Right.
Do I allow that? Or not?
Typically, I don't. I'm a security engineer. I'm generally paranoid. If I don't know how somebody is storing my password,
right.
and I don't know where someone is storing my password, I usually say no. So I tell my browsers not to prompt me. Now, there are some, like LastPass is a cloud-based service, and you can get plugins for your browser. Okay, I do have a LastPass account, but although that's one I used with kind of the split password thing. But some of those will have plugins. I would trust those a little bit more maybe than the browser because, like I said, you don't know where it's putting that data.
Okay, so you're okay with a third party like a LastPass auto-filling those passwords for you.
I've done that. It doesn't work for me because I split the passwords like I mentioned earlier.
Right. But you're okay with the security of those.
I would be okay. I would be okay with that. Yeah, and especially for most users and most of what they're doing. And again, do that little risk assessment. Is it your bank account? Okay, maybe you don't put that one in the cloud. But is it a login that you're using? For a retail site, those kind of things. Right. Those are lower risk, easier to use.
Gotcha. All right, talk to me about disk encryption.
Right, and this is a big thing. So what used to happen is somebody, if they got your laptop or if they got your desktop computer, even if there was a password on it to log in, they could pull the hard drive out, put it in another computer, and read all the files. Okay, it's very important that we don't allow that anymore. Now, Windows, Mac OS, both of them natively allow disk encryption using BitLocker for Windows and FileVault for Mac. And actually, most Macs, the new Macs now are coming out of the box that ask you if you want to encrypt the disk. The answer is yes.
So I'm going to go back on you and talk about the browser, saving your password in the browser. I know that one scam tactic that I've seen is if you have like a situation where somebody's calling you and you enable a screen share situation, and they might be talking to you about something else, but they really have locked your screen and are going and auto going into your bank account, transferring money, that sort of thing. Have you talked to me about that type of scam?
Yeah, I would never, if somebody calls me on the phone and says, hey, I need you to do this, I need you to go to this website, or I'm going to email you a link, click on this link. The easiest way to thwart that, because never share any information with somebody that called you over the phone. Right. What you do is you say, that's great, you're with Citibank. I'm going to hang up, I'm going to call you back and at your 800 number, and I'm going to and if you will tell at that point that they know that they're not going to take you. Yeah. That is the best way to go, is to say, I'm sorry I don't do this. I'm going to give you guys a call back and verify this is right.
All right, so let's talk about number 4, applying software updates.
Yeah, then this is another very simple step, whether it's Android or iPhone or Mac OS or Windows. go in and turn on the automatic updates. Every security bug that comes out that Microsoft and Apple, those guys are aware of, they write a patch for it immediately, and it's pushed out at least once a week, and you'll see those pop up. We've got and Apple actually tells you it's a security update. Windows, it's a weekly update. Just turn those on. That's one of the most effective ways to keep your computer secure, is to keep those security patches going on as fast as they're available.
What if, I'm going to play devil's advocate for you.
Yeah.
What if I'm more of a creative or more kind of in the know about what software updates do, and I don't want to do that update because I'm waiting on something to make sure that something else doesn't break, or I want to make sure that this, I want to wait on the update. We
go through that all the time at work, and what we can do, and it takes a little more effort, you can apply the updates. In Windows, you can actually roll back the updates. So if something stopped working, you can go in and say, hey, the ones that came out on Tuesday, uncheck and go back to the way it was before. Then you can contact your other software vendor. They're probably already aware of that problem. And tell them, hey, Microsoft rolled out this patch for Windows and this stopped working, so can you fix that so I can get the security patch?
Is that always the case, though? Like, I know I'm a Mac guy.
Right.
And they don't always tell you, it's just you need the new OS.
Right. And with the Mac OS, they will do security releases, but a lot of times they just roll it in to, iOS.
Right.
The next version of the iOS.
So I can't just get the security update. I have to get everything. Which could be a problem for me as a creative doing, I don't want to do that yet.
Right.
How vulnerable is that going to make me to not do that?
If you don't want to take that, then what you need to do when you decline the update is jump in there, read through the software notes for the update. Okay. First of all, see if it's got any security updates in it. If it doesn't, you're in the clear, right? If it does have a security update, then maybe you call your creative software supplier and say, hey, Mac has got this. Is it okay to go ahead and put it on the system?
Okay, let's talk about hardware. When is it good or necessary for me to replace the hardware for security reasons?
Sure. For hardware, the general rule is 5 years, but the real rule is the operating system has to still be getting security updates. Now, Microsoft does about 5 years. Apple, based on what I've seen lately, runs about 3. So as long as you can keep updating the operating system, you're okay. You could take a really old computer and put a Linux web server on it. But yeah, 3 to 5 years, depending on Windows or Apple, as long as it's still running the OS.
Okay, so is this true for my phone, my computer, any piece of technology? When I start to not be able to download apps because the OS is too old,
that's a really good sign it's time, yeah.
Okay.
Now, the other thing you want to think about is you've got devices in your house. Maybe you've got a smart TV, you've got a thermostat or something. I've got a garage door opener, right? They all have, it's called an IoT device, Internet of Things. A lot of people have those things. They don't even really realize it. Those follow that same rule. As long as you're getting software security updates for them, you can keep them. Once that stops, it's time to replace the hardware.
Okay, 2 more for you. Setting up web content filtering.
Yeah,
walk me through that.
That is I would say it's a super easy thing. I'm a network engineer. If you talk to your network engineer, it's really easy to put this in so that everybody that logs into your network, instead of going to a regular, when they go to a website, this content filtering it runs it by a check first. Okay, is this a bad website? Is this a known malicious website? It is? Okay, we're not going to let you go there. So it blocks, I've got that at my home. We use it at work to stop people from getting out there. That's kind of a technical discussion to get into, but people need to know there are free services out there that can do that. You configure it in one place on your router. It protects your whole church.
Gotcha. Okay, so round me out here. Why the need? One thing I was thinking of too, before I get to that, is sometimes there's a tension between the IT department. I'm talking church world.
Of course.
A tension between IT world and creatives. Like, hey, don't blot me down because I need to get whatever.
Right.
So talk to me about that tension. How do I manage it from an IT perspective? Do I let some people do some things and not other things?
Again, that comes down to your risk assessment. If you can put your creative people on a completely separate network and have them isolated from the information that the not public information, right? Because you're creating sermon graphics and that kind of thing. If someone were to get in and modify those without your permission, you've got a backup or whatever. But you keep that separate from the financial systems, and then those financial ones are the ones you want to lock down more.
Good. Okay, last one. Configure network segmentation.
Right. That is actually just what I was talking about. Let's separate the guest Wi-Fi from the creative network from the finance guys. Your network engineer or your network service, when you start talking that, they'll say, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Here, let's go to do that. Here's the hardware you need. Here's what it'll cost.
All right, so let's circle back to the why. Why is it important for me to be so secure?
I really feel like we live in a day and age where the church is, not everybody out there is our friend, okay?
Yeah.
And I think that at the very least, we need to do our best in due diligence to protect the information that people trust us with.
Yeah.
Whether that's counseling records for your pastor or financial information for the church, we've got to do our due diligence because there are people out there that seek to do us harm.
Yeah. Good. Well, man, thank you for sharing this. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. Hey guys, hanging out with Jason Noble from the Kidman Tribe podcast. Jason, tell me, you have a great guest, your next guest on the Kidman Tribe. Who is it? Tell me what you guys are going to talk about.
Definitely. It's Karen Kingsbury, the #1 New York Times bestseller of Christian books, Christian fiction on romance and great stories. We're going to talk about how we build a family in the midst of a busy ministry schedule. They also have some great new resources out for kids. And I guarantee you, leaders and Kidman people, you are not going to want to miss an incredible interview with Karen Kingsbury.
Jason, thanks, man. You can catch episodes of the Kidman Tribe podcast every 2 weeks at kidmantribe.com. Check it out.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out this week. Again, if you like our podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, share our show wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. It's going to come right up in your feed. You'll be notified as soon as we drop new episodes. So be sure to do that so that you never miss one when we release one. We're releasing new episodes every single Monday for you. And next week on the show, I welcome my friends Mark McDonald and Reed Verisoto. I'm going to be talking with Mark and Reed about how to better organize your website to see more visitors at your church on Sunday. Some Google, some SEO, some website organization, and more for you. That's all next week on the podcast. It's all leading up to episode number 400 with worship leader and recording artist Chris Tomlin will be in the house. He'll be right here on the podcast in just a few weeks on that milestone episode for us. The interview is in the can. You don't want to miss it. It's coming up in just a few weeks. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences at your church this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.